Elena Torres stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching enemy ships fill the dark space around Earth. Red lights blinked on every screen. Warning sounds echoed through the metal halls. The last human battleship shook as alien weapons hit its shields. "Commander, shields down to 30%, called Marcus Webb from his station. The chief engineer's hands moved fast over his controls, trying to keep the ship alive. His face was covered in sweat and worry. Elena looked at the main screen. Thousands of alien ships surrounded Earth like angry insects. The planet below looked sick and dying. Most of its cities were dark. Smoke rose from burning forests. Only a few million humans were left, hiding deep underground. "How many ships do they have now?" Elena asked. "Our computers stopped counting." "At 50,000, said Dr. Kate Rivers. The scientist's voice was quiet and scared. "The hegemony brought everything they have. Ships from all 12 of their worlds." Elena touched the metal scars on her face. The cybernetic parts under her skin felt cold. She had gotten them in the battle for Mars 3 years ago. That was when she learned that humans could never win by fighting the old way. The aliens were too many, too strong, too advanced. The hegemony had been destroying human colonies for 20 years. They moved from star to star like a plague, taking everything and leaving nothing alive. Humans had tried to fight back, but it was like throwing rocks at a mountain. "Commander," Marcus said, "we're getting a signal from Earth Command." Elena nodded. "Put it through." General Ross appeared on the screen. His old face looked tired and desperate. Behind him, Elena could see the underground bunker where Earth's last leaders hid. "Elena," the general said, "it's time for Operation Phoenix." Elena felt her heart beat faster. Operation Phoenix was their last hope, but it was also a death mission. The plan was simple and crazy at the same time. Human scientists had found something in the center of the galaxy, ancient alien technology that was older than any known civilization. The strange part was that only humans could use it. "The artifacts are waiting for you," General Ross continued. "Our best scientists say that human brains can connect to this old technology in ways that other aliens cannot. We don't know why, but we know it's true." Elena looked around the bridge at her crew. 12 people. That was all that was left of Earth's mighty space fleet. 12 brave souls who had volunteered to fly into the unknown. "The wormhole to the galactic center is ready," the general said. "But the path is dangerous. The aliens are chasing you, and the wormhole will collapse after you go through. There will be no way back." "Understood, sir," Elena said. "Elena," the general's voice became soft. "You know this might be the last time we talk." "I know." Elena stood straight and proud. "But if there's even a small chance to save humanity, we have to take it." Marcus looked up from his station. "Commander, the alien fleet is moving closer. They're preparing for a final attack on Earth." Elena could see the truth in everyone's eyes. Earth would fall today. The underground bunkers might last a few more weeks, but the end was coming. Unless Operation Phoenix worked, humanity would die. "All hands prepare for jump to the galactic center," Elena announced over the ship's communication system. "This is our moment. This is why we're here." Dr. Rivers walked over to Elena. "Commander, I need to tell you something about the artifacts. The energy readings we detected are unlike anything we've ever seen. When you connect to them, there might be changes to your body and mind." "What kind of changes?" Elena asked. "We don't know. The technology is so advanced that we can barely understand it. But the computer models suggest that it will enhance your abilities far beyond normal human limits." Elena nodded. She had already accepted that she might not survive this mission. If she had to become something else to save her people, so be it. "Commander," Marcus called out, "the wormhole is opening." On the screen, Elena could see space itself tearing apart. The wormhole looked like a tunnel made of lightning and stars. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Take us in," Elena ordered. The Defiant turned toward the wormhole. Behind them, alien ships started firing. Energy beams lit up the darkness, but they were too late. The human ship dove into the swirling tunnel of light. The journey through the wormhole felt like flying through a storm made of time itself. The ship shook and twisted as reality bent around them. Elena held on to her chair as the lights flickered and the metal groaned. "Systems failing," Marcus shouted over the noise. "Hull. Pressure dropping. We're losing life support on decks 3 and 4. "Keep us together," Elena said. "We're almost through." Dr. Rivers was watching her instruments with wide eyes. "Commander, I'm reading something impossible. The energy levels ahead of us are off the charts. Whatever is waiting for us is more powerful than our entire fleet." The shaking stopped suddenly. The Defiant burst out of the wormhole into normal space. Elena looked at the screen and gasped. They were in the center of the galaxy, surrounded by massive crystal structures that floated in space like frozen lightning. Each crystal was bigger than a city, glowing with soft blue light. There were hundreds of them, forming a perfect circle around a bright star. "My God," Dr. Rivers whispered. "These are the artifacts, the remains of the Builder civilization." Elena felt something strange happening in her head. The cybernetic parts under her skin were getting warm. The metal in her bones was vibrating like a tuning fork. "Commander," Marcus said, "I'm getting readings that don't make sense. These crystals are scanning us. They're looking for something." Elena stood up. She could feel the ancient technology calling to her. It was like a voice in her mind, speaking in a language older than words. "Take us to the largest crystal," she ordered. As the Defiant moved closer, Elena realized that her life as a normal human was ending. Whatever happened next would change everything. But if it meant saving Earth, if it meant giving humanity a future, she was ready. The ship docked with the crystal structure. Elena walked to the airlock, knowing that when she stepped outside, she would begin a journey that would either save her species or destroy her. Behind them, the wormhole collapsed. There was no going back now. Elena took a deep breath and opened the door to her destiny. Elena floated through the crystal tunnel in her spacesuit. The walls around her glowed with soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Marcus and Dr. Rivers followed close behind, their breathing loud in the radio. "These crystals are alive," Dr. Rivers said, running her scanner over the walls. "Not alive like animals, but the energy patterns are moving and changing." Elena could feel something pulling her forward. The cybernetic parts in her head were getting warmer with each step. It was like the crystal structure was calling to her personally. They reached a large chamber at the center of the crystal. Inside was a pillar of pure light that stretched from floor to ceiling. Around the pillar, symbols floated in the air, writing themselves in languages that had been dead for millions of years. "Commander," Marcus said, "my equipment is going crazy. The energy in this room could power Earth for 1,000 years." Elena walked toward the pillar of light. As she got closer, the symbols started changing. The alien writing became numbers, then pictures, then finally words she could understand. "Welcome, children of Earth," the words said. "We have been waiting." Elena reached out and touched the pillar. The moment her gloved hand made contact, electricity shot through her body. But it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey. Suddenly, Elena was no longer in the crystal chamber. She was standing in a place that existed, only in her mind, surrounded by beings of pure light. They looked almost human, but taller and more beautiful than any person she had ever seen. "We are the Builders," one of them said without speaking. The words appeared directly in Elena's thoughts. "We created this technology long ago, before your son was born." Elena tried to speak, but found she could communicate with thoughts alone. "Why can you only humans use your technology?" The Builder smiled. Because you are our children, not in body, but in spirit. Long ago, some of our people went to your world. They lived there and had families. Over millions of years, their descendants became you. Elena saw visions of Earth's history. She watched as the first humans developed tools, language, and civilization. She saw how humans were different from other aliens in the galaxy. Where other species became strong or smart or fast, humans became adaptable. They could survive anything, learn from any situation, and never give up hope. Other species developed technology to make themselves powerful, the builder explained. But humans developed something more valuable. You developed the ability to grow and change and overcome any obstacle. This is why our technology responds to you. Elena saw more visions. She watched alien civilizations rise and fall. She saw species that became so advanced they forgot how to struggle. They became weak and easily conquered. But humans were different. Every challenge made them stronger. Your species has suffered greatly, the builder said, but suffering has made you into what you needed to become. Now you are ready to claim your inheritance. Elena felt the ancient technology flowing into her mind. It was like learning to use muscles she never knew she had. She could suddenly see patterns in space and time. She could understand how gravity worked, how energy moved through the universe, how to bend reality itself. But there is a price, the builder warned. To use our technology fully, you must become more than human. You will gain great power, but you will also lose parts of yourself that you can never get back. Elena thought of Earth burning. She thought of the millions of humans hiding underground, waiting to die. She thought of all the human colonies that had already been destroyed. I accept, she said. The moment she spoke those words, Elena felt herself changing. The cybernetic parts in her body began merging with the builder technology. Her brain started processing information at impossible speeds. She could suddenly sense every ship in the galaxy, every planet, every star. Elena opened her eyes back in the crystal chamber. Marcus and Dr. Rivers were staring at her with worry and fear. "Commander," Marcus said, "you've been standing there for 10 minutes without moving." Elena looked at her hands. They looked the same, but she could feel power flowing through them like electricity. She could sense the Defiant docked outside, every system and every wire. She could feel her crew's heartbeats, their thoughts, their fears. "Elena," Dr. Rivers said carefully, "are you okay?" Before Elena could answer, alarms started ringing throughout the crystal structure. On the Defiant, warning lights flashed as Marcus's equipment detected incoming ships. "Hegemony Fleet," Marcus said, reading his scanners. 50 ships, led by Admiral Kane. Elena felt anger rise in her chest. Admiral Kane had been human once, but he had betrayed his own species years ago. He joined the aliens because he thought humans couldn't win. Now he was coming to stop her from saving humanity. Elena walked back to the Defiant, but this time she moved differently. She seemed to glide instead of walking. Her eyes glowed with a faint blue light. On the bridge, Elena looked at the main screen. She could see Kane's fleet approaching through space. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They thought they were coming to kill the last humans in the galaxy. "Commander," Marcus said, "what are your orders?" Elena smiled, but it wasn't entirely human anymore. "Show them what happens when you threaten Earth's children." Elena placed her hands on the ship's control panel. Immediately, the Defiant began changing. The builder technology flowed through its systems, upgrading everything. Instantly, the ship's weapons became more powerful than anything in the galaxy. Its shields became unbreakable, but Elena didn't stop there. She reached out with her mind and activated the crystal structures around them, the ancient artifacts that had floated silently in space for millions of years suddenly came alive. Admiral Kane's ships opened fire as soon as they were in range. Energy beams that could destroy cities hit the crystal structures and did nothing. The ancient shields absorbed the attacks like raindrops hitting the ocean. Elena closed her eyes and felt the builder technology respond to her will. The crystals began to move, arranging themselves into new patterns. Beams of pure energy shot out from them, not to destroy Kane's ships, but to disable them completely. In seconds, the entire hegemony fleet was floating helplessly in space. Their weapons were dead, their engines were silent, their shields were gone. Elena opened a communication channel to Kane's flagship. Admiral Kane appeared on the screen, his face full of shock and fear. "Hello, Kane," Elena said. Her voice was calm but had an echo that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Elena Torres," Kane said. "I should have known. Earth always did produce the most stubborn fighters." "You were human once," Elena said. "You could be human again." Kane laughed bitterly. "Human? Look around you, Elena. Humanity is finished. I chose the winning side." Elena stood up from her chair. Behind her, the crystal structures continued to glow and pulse with ancient power. "You chose fear over hope. You chose to kneel instead of fight. That's not human at all." Elena waved her hand, and Kane's ships suddenly had power again, but their weapons were permanently disabled. "Go back to your masters," Elena said. "Tell them that humanity has found its strength. Tell them that Earth's children are coming home." Kane's ships turned and fled into the darkness. Elena watched them go, feeling both sadness and determination. The transformation had begun, and there was no going back. Dr. Rivers approached Elena, carefully. "Commander, how do you feel?" Elena looked at her old friend. "Different. More than I was, but also less. The builder technology is changing me, Kate. I can feel it happening." "Are you still you?" Dr. Rivers asked. Elena considered the question. She could feel vast knowledge flowing into her mind. She could sense patterns across space and time that no human had ever seen. But underneath it all, she still felt the determination to protect her people. "I'm still me," Elena said, "but I'm also becoming something else. Something that can save humanity." Marcus looked up from his instruments. "Commander?" "I'm detecting human life signs throughout the galaxy. Survivors in hidden colonies, prisoners on alien worlds. Thousands of them." Elena nodded. She could sense them too now, scattered across the stars like seeds waiting to grow. "Then that's where we go next," Elena said. "It's time to bring our people home." News of Elena's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On hegemony worlds, alien leaders gathered in emergency meetings. On prison planets, human slaves whispered stories of their commander who had returned from the dead. In hidden colonies, survivors looked up at the stars with hope for the first time in years. Elena stood in the main chamber of what had once been a crystal artifact, but was now becoming something new. The builder technology was reshaping it into a mobile command center, a fortress that could travel between stars. Around her, rescued humans worked alongside the Defiant's original crew to understand their new home. "Commander," said Colonel James Park, a man Elena had rescued from a prison world 3 weeks ago, "we've located another human colony. They're hiding in the asteroid belt of the Vega system." Elena nodded, but she didn't turn around. She was studying a holographic map that showed the entire galaxy. On it, red dots marked hegemony strongholds. Blue dots showed human survivors. The red dots still outnumbered the blue ones by thousands. "How many people?" Elena asked. "About 500, Park replied. "They've been hiding there for 8 years, mining rare metals and staying quiet." Dr. Rivers approached with her latest report. "Elena, I need to talk to you about the changes you're experiencing." Elena finally turned around. Her eyes now glowed with a constant blue light, and when she moved, She seemed to leave trails of energy in the air. She no longer needed to sleep, and she rarely ate. The builder technology was rewriting her biology day by day. "What did you find, Kate?" Elena asked. "Your brain activity has increased by over 300%, Dr. Rivers said, showing Elena her scanner readings. "You're processing information at speeds that should be impossible for human neurons. But it's not just making you smarter. It's changing how you think." Elena looked at the scanner data. She could understand it perfectly, even though it was written in technical language that would have confused her months ago. "I can see patterns now that I never noticed before. Battle strategies, supply lines, political movements. It's like I'm seeing the galaxy from above instead of from inside it." Marcus walked over from the engineering station. "Commander, we've got the new ships ready for testing." Elena followed him to the observation deck. Outside, a dozen human ships floated in space. But these weren't the same vessels they had been before. The builder technology had transformed them into something new. Their hulls were smooth and gleaming. Energy fields surrounded them like glowing armor. "The weapons can punch through any known shield," Marcus explained. "The engines can bend space itself to travel faster than anything in the galaxy, and the hulls can phase through solid matter when needed." Elena watched as one of the ships demonstrated its abilities. It flew straight toward an asteroid and passed through it like it was made of air. Then it reappeared on the other side and fired a beam of energy that turned another asteroid into dust. "Good," Elena said. "But remember, we're not trying to become conquerors. We're trying to become protectors." Captain Rosa Martinez, a former slave soldier Elena had freed from the mines of Titan 7th, joined them at the observation deck. "Commander, some of the rescued humans are having trouble accepting the changes. They say you don't seem human anymore." Elena felt a stab of sadness. She had expected this. The more she used the builder technology, the more she could feel herself becoming something beyond normal human experience. She could think faster, see farther, and understand more than any person in history. But the price was that ordinary human concerns were starting to feel distant and small. "What do they want me to do, Rosa?" Elena asked. "They want to know that you still care about individual people, not just humanity as a whole," Rosa replied. Elena considered this. It was true that she sometimes found herself thinking of humans as numbers in equations rather than as individual lives. When she planned rescue missions, she calculated acceptable losses. When she made strategic decisions, she considered what was best for the species rather than what was best for specific people. "I'll talk to them," Elena promised. Dr. Alex Chen, a scientist who had been experimenting with human alien technology before his rescue, approached with urgent news. "Commander, we've intercepted hegemony communications. They're planning something big." Elena followed Chen to the communications center. On the main screen, alien leaders were arguing in their harsh languages. The translation system worked overtime to convert their words into English. "Overlord Vex is angry," Chen explained. "He's lost 3 fleets to your forces, and more species are starting to rebel against hegemony rule." Elena watched Overlord Vex on the screen. He was a massive creature with 6 arms and skin like black metal. He had ruled the hegemony for over 50 years, conquering world after world with ruthless efficiency. "What is he planning?" Elena asked. "Total mobilization," Chen said. "He's calling back every ship from every world. They're gathering the largest fleet in galactic history, over 1 million ships." Elena felt her enhanced mind processing this information. 1 million ships was more than she had ever faced before. Even with the builder technology, the odds would be difficult. But then she noticed something else in the hegemony communications. Fear. The alien leaders were afraid. For the first time in their history, they were fighting an enemy they couldn't understand. "There's more," Chen continued. "They're also moving toward completion of something called the Star Killer." Elena's enhanced senses immediately understood what this meant. The Star Killer was a weapon that could destroy entire star systems. If the hegemony couldn't defeat her through conventional warfare, they would simply destroy every human world they could find. "How long do we have?" Elena asked. 6 months, maybe less, Chen replied. Elena looked around at her growing fleet. She now had 50 ships and about 3,000 human survivors. Against 1,000,000 enemy ships, it wasn't enough. She needed more than just military power. She needed something that would change the nature of the conflict itself. "Commander," said Thane, a reptilian alien who had defected from the hegemony after witnessing Elena's mercy toward defeated enemies. "There are other species who hate the hegemony as much as humans do. The bird people of Astra Prime, the crystal beings of the Nexus worlds, the energy creatures from the void between stars." Elena turned to look at Thane. The alien warrior stood, 8 feet tall, and had fought for the hegemony for 20 years before switching sides. His people had been conquered early in the hegemony's expansion, and many of them still served as slaves. "Are you suggesting an alliance?" Elena asked. "I'm suggesting that you show them what you showed me," Thane replied. "That there's another way to live besides conquest and slavery." Elena nodded slowly. Her enhanced mind was already working through the possibilities. An alliance of free species could challenge the hegemony's power. But it would require her to become more than just a military commander. She would have to become a diplomat, a leader, a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy. "Marcus," Elena said, "how long would it take to retrofit our ships for long-range diplomatic missions?" "A few days," Marcus replied. "But Elena, you're changing faster now. Each time you use more of the builder technology, you become less human." Elena looked at her reflection in the window. Her skin had a faint blue glow now, and her eyes were becoming more silver than brown. She could feel her emotions changing too. Love, fear, anger, and joy were still there, but they felt muted and distant, like memories of feelings rather than feelings themselves. "I know," Elena said softly, "but if I don't change, humanity dies. If I do change, at least humanity has a chance." Dr. Rivers placed a gentle hand on Elena's shoulder. "There might be a way to slow down the transformation. If we could understand the builder technology better, maybe we could find a way to use it without losing yourself completely." Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked almost human again. "Kate, you've been trying to save me since this started. But maybe what humanity needs isn't for me to stay the same. Maybe what they need is for someone to be willing to become something else for their sake." That night, Elena stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. She could feel the weight of 3,000 human lives depending on her decisions. But she could also feel the potential for millions more lives to be saved if she succeeded. Tomorrow, she would begin reaching out to other species. She would offer them something the hegemony never could: the chance to be free. But she also knew that each step forward would take her further away from the human she had once been. Elena touched the window with her hand, leaving a brief glow where her fingers made contact. She was becoming something new, something powerful, something that could save the galaxy, but she was also becoming something that could never go home again. The price of victory was getting higher every day. The slave world of Nexus Prime hung in space like a metal ball covered in factories and prison camps. On its surface, millions of humans worked in the mines and manufacturing plants that fed the hegemony war machine. They had been slaves for so long that most had given up hope of ever seeing freedom. Elena's fleet approached the heavily defended world with a plan unlike anything used in galactic warfare before. Instead of attacking directly, she would use the builder technology to phase her ships through the planet's defenses and strike from within. "Commander," Colonel Park said from his station, "enemy fleet composition includes 200 ships, orbital defense platforms, and ground-based energy cannons. Standard military doctrine would require at least 500 ships to take this world." Elena stood at the center of her command chamber, surrounded by floating displays that showed every detail of the battle to come. Her eyes glowed brighter. Now, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to come from the technology itself. Standard military doctrine assumes that you have to fight your way through defenses, Elena said. But what if we simply go around them? She waved her hand, and the displays changed to show her battle plan. Her ships would approach Nexus Prime normally, drawing the enemy fleet into position. Then, at the last moment, they would phase through solid matter and appear inside the planet's defensive perimeter. "Rosa," Elena said to Captain Martinez, "take your squadron and begin the approach. Make it look like a conventional attack." Rosa nodded and headed to her ship. She had adapted well to the new technology, but Elena could see the concern in her eyes. Like everyone else, Rosa was worried about what Elena was becoming. The battle began exactly as Elena had planned. Rosa's ships approached Nexus Prime, and the hegemony fleet moved to intercept them. Weapons fire lit up space as the two forces engaged in what appeared to be a normal space battle. But Elena was waiting for the perfect moment. She could see the flow of the battle in her mind like a three-dimensional chess game. She knew exactly when the enemy would be most vulnerable. "Now," Elena said. Her command ship and 20 others suddenly became translucent. They passed through the hegemony ships like ghosts, through the orbital defenses like they didn't exist, and appeared in the atmosphere of Nexus Prime itself. The hegemony forces were caught completely off guard. Their weapons were designed to fight in space, not against enemies that appeared inside their defensive lines. Within minutes, Elena's forces had disabled every major military installation on the planet. But Elena wasn't finished. She opened communication. "Channels to every human slave on Nexus Prime. People of Earth," her voice echoed through every speaker on the planet. "This is Commander Elena Torres. Your freedom begins today." The response was immediate. In factories and mines across the planet, human slaves stopped working and looked up at the sky. Many of them had never heard Elena's name, but they all knew what her words meant. The hegemony. Ground forces tried to restore order, but Elena had another surprise waiting. Her ships began broadcasting the builder technology directly to the human slaves below. Suddenly, ordinary people found themselves able to understand alien technology, to override security systems, to open locked doors. Within hours, the planet was in full revolt. Humans who had been slaves for decades were now fighting back with weapons they had never seen before, but somehow knew how to use. Admiral Kane arrived with reinforcements 3 days later, but by then it was too late. Nexus Prime was free, and 3 million humans had been liberated. Elena met with the freed slaves in the planet's main city. The people gathered in vast crowds to see the woman who had saved them. But when Elena appeared before them, many were shocked by how much she had changed. She no longer looked entirely human. Her skin had a metallic sheen, and energy flowed around her like a visible aura. When she spoke, her words carried such power that they seemed to echo in people's minds long after she finished talking. "My friends," Elena said to the crowd, "you are free. But freedom is not just the absence of chains. True freedom means having the power to choose your own destiny." An old man stepped forward from the crowd. His name was David Walsh, and he had been a slave for 30 years. "Commander Torres," he said, "we've heard stories about you. They say you've become something more than human." Elena looked down at the old man with eyes that held depths no human eyes had ever contained. "I have become what I needed to become. To save our people," she said. "But I want you to know that everything I do for humans like you." A young woman named Lisa Chen spoke up. "But are you still one of us? Can you still understand what it's like to be human?" Elena paused before answering. It was a fair question. Each day, she found it harder to relate to normal human concerns. When she planned strategies, she thought in terms of acceptable losses and necessary sacrifices. When she made decisions, she considered what was best for humanity as a species, rather than what was best for individuals. "I remember what it was like to be human," Elena said finally. "And I remember why it's worth fighting for. Your capacity for hope, for love, for refusing to give up even in the darkest times. That's what makes humans special. That's what I'm trying to protect." The crowd seemed satisfied with her answer, but Elena could see doubt in some of their faces. She was becoming something beyond their understanding, and that frightened them. Over the following weeks, Elena established Nexus Prime as a base for liberated humans. The planet's factories were converted from making weapons for the hegemony to producing ships and equipment for the growing human fleet. But Elena's transformation was accelerating. She no longer needed to eat or sleep. She could process information from thousands of sources simultaneously. Her tactical abilities had grown so advanced that she could predict enemy movements days before they happened. Dr. Rivers tried to monitor Elena's condition, but her instruments could barely measure what Elena was becoming. "Your cellular structure is changing," she told Elena during one of their sessions. "You're becoming something that's part biological, part energy, part pure information. How long do I have before the change is complete?" Elena asked. "I don't know," Rivers admitted. "But at this rate, you might have months rather than years." Elena nodded calmly. She had already accepted that she would not survive this war as a human being. But she was determined to ensure that humanity itself would survive. News of Nexus Prime's liberation spread throughout the galaxy. On other hegemony worlds, slave populations began to organize. Some alien species that had been conquered by the hegemony started reaching out to Elena's forces. The first non-human ally to join Elena's cause was Flux, an energy being from the void between stars. Flux's people had been imprisoned in special containment fields by the hegemony for decades. "Your pattern is unlike anything we have observed," Flux told Elena when they first met. The energy being's words came as pulses of light rather than sounds. "You are becoming something that bridges the gap between matter and energy, between individual consciousness and collective awareness." "Is that good or bad?" Elena asked. "It is necessary," Flux replied. "The hegemony can only be defeated by something they cannot understand or predict. You are becoming that something." Elena's reputation continued to grow. Stories spread of a human commander who could phase through solid matter, who could predict enemy movements before they happened, who could inspire ordinary people to perform impossible acts of courage. But with her growing power came growing isolation. Elena found herself thinking less about individual people and more about large-scale patterns and strategic necessities. She could still feel love for humanity, but it was becoming an abstract love rather than a personal one. Marcus noticed the change during one of their planning sessions. "Elena," he said, "when you talk about rescuing human colonies, you sound like you're discussing moving pieces on a game board rather than saving people's lives." Elena looked at her old friend with eyes that seemed to see beyond the present moment into possible futures. "I see the patterns now, Marcus. I can see which colonies can be saved and which ones cannot. I can see which battles are worth fighting and which ones we must avoid. It's not that I don't care about individual lives, but I have to think about the survival of our entire species." Marcus nodded sadly. He could see that Elena was becoming something magnificent and terrible at the same time. She was gaining the power to save humanity, but losing the very thing that made her human in the process. That night, Elena stood alone in her private chamber, looking at a photograph of Earth from before the war. In the picture, she could see blue oceans, green continents, and white clouds. It looked peaceful and beautiful, nothing like the burned world she had left behind. She touched the photograph with one finger, and for a moment, The image glowed with the same blue light that flowed through her body. She could feel the weight of every human life depending on her decisions. She could sense the fear and hope of millions of people across the galaxy. Elena closed her eyes and felt the builder technology flowing through her mind like a river of liquid starlight. She was becoming something that could save her people, but she was also becoming something that could never go home again. The Hydra Nebula stretched across space like a cosmic spiderweb made of glowing gas and electrical storms. It was here that Overlord Vex had chosen to make his stand, bringing together the largest military force in galactic history. Over 1 million. Ships from 12 different worlds formed a defensive wall that seemed impossible to break. Elena's fleet numbered only 3,000 ships now, but each one had been transformed by builder technology into something beyond conventional understanding. Her forces included humans, the energy beings led by Flux, reptilian warriors like Thane, and representatives from 6 other species that had joined her rebellion against the hegemony. Elena stood in the command center of her flagship, which had grown from the original crystal artifact into a massive structure that was part ship, part fortress, and part living entity. Around her, holographic displays showed the enemy formation in perfect detail. "Commander," reported Colonel Park, "enemy fleet analysis is complete. They have us outnumbered 300 to 1. Standard tactical doctrine says this battle cannot be won." Elena turned to look at Park, and he stepped back involuntarily. Her transformation had accelerated dramatically over the past months. She no longer looked human at all. Her body seemed to be made of condensed starlight, and when she moved, reality itself seemed to bend around her. "James," Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing, "when has standard tactical doctrine ever applied to us?" Elena waved her hand, and the displays changed to show her battle plan. It was unlike anything that had ever been attempted in galactic warfare. Instead of fighting the enemy fleet directly, she would turn the nebula itself into a weapon. The Hydra Nebula contains electromagnetic storms that can disable electronic systems, Elena explained. It also contains pockets of exotic matter that can be manipulated with builder technology. We're not going to fight 1 million ships. We're going to make the 1 million ships fight the nebula. Dr. Rivers, who had been monitoring Elena's transformation with growing concern, spoke up. "Elena, the amount of energy required to manipulate an entire nebula would be enormous. It could complete your transformation all at once." Elena looked at her old friend with eyes that seemed to contain the light of distant stars. "Kate, I stopped being human weeks ago. What matters now is whether I can be something that saves humanity." The battle began with what appeared to be a conventional attack. Elena's forces approached the enemy lines, drawing fire from thousands of weapons. Energy beams and missile swarms lit up the space between the two fleets. But this was just the opening move in Elena's strategy. As her ships engaged the outer edge of the hegemony fleet, she began reaching out with her consciousness into the nebula itself. Elena could feel the vast electrical storms that raged through the cosmic cloud. She could sense the exotic matter that existed in pockets throughout the region. Most importantly, she could feel the fundamental forces that held the nebula together. "Now," Elena said, and her voice carried across every ship in her fleet simultaneously. Elena began to manipulate the nebula's electromagnetic field. Suddenly, the electrical storms that had been scattered throughout the cosmic cloud began to converge on specific points. Massive lightning bolts, each one larger than a planet, began striking the hegemony ships. But Elena wasn't finished. She reached deeper into the nebula's structure and began to manipulate the exotic matter pockets. Space itself started to warp and twist around the enemy fleet. Ships that tried to escape found themselves moving in circles. Weapons that were fired at Elena's forces curved around and struck their own allies. Overlord Vex himself was commanding the hegemony forces from his flagship, a massive dreadnought that was larger than most space stations. as he watched his fleet being torn apart by forces beyond his understanding. He realized that he was facing an enemy unlike anything in galactic history. "All ships, focus fire on the human command vessel," Vex ordered. "Concentrate everything we have on Torres." Thousands of weapons turned toward Elena's flagship. Energy beams that could destroy planets converged on her position. For a moment, it seemed like even builder technology couldn't withstand such overwhelming firepower. But Elena simply smiled, an expression that was both beautiful and terrifying on her transformed features. She reached out with her consciousness and touched every weapon beam that was aimed at her ship. One by one, the energy attacks stopped in mid-flight, suspended in space like frozen lightning. Then Elena reversed them. Every weapon that had been fired at her turned around and flew back toward the ships that had launched them. The hegemony fleet found itself under attack from its own weapons. Admiral Kane, commanding a section of the enemy fleet, watched in horror as reality itself seemed to bend to Elena's will. He opened a communication channel to her flagship. "Elena," Kane said, his voice full of awe and fear, "what have you become?" Elena appeared on his screen, but she no longer looked like the human officer he had once known. She was a being of pure energy wearing the shape of a person, with power that seemed to extend beyond the physical universe. "I have become what I needed to become, Kane," Elena replied. "I have become humanity's guardian." The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Elena didn't just defeat the hegemony fleet. She demonstrated power on a scale that made conventional warfare obsolete. Ships that tried to flee found themselves paralyzed. Weapons that tried to fire found themselves redirected. The massive fleet that had taken decades to assemble was disabled in a single day. But Elena's display of power had consequences she hadn't expected. Throughout the galaxy, every species with advanced sensors detected what had happened in the Hydra Nebula. They saw readings that were off every known scale, energy signatures that suggested power levels beyond their ability to measure. Some species were terrified. Others were amazed. But all of them realized that the balance of power in the galaxy had fundamentally changed. As the defeated hegemony ships surrendered or retreated, Elena stood alone in her command center. The effort of manipulating the entire nebula had pushed her transformation to its final stages. She could feel her human consciousness fragmenting and expanding, becoming something that existed on multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Marcus approached her carefully. "Elena, are you still there?" Elena turned to look at him, and for a moment he saw a flicker of the woman he had once known. "I'm still here, Marcus, but I'm also becoming something else. Something that can protect humanity, even after this war is over." Dr. Rivers ran her scanners over Elena one last time. The readings were unlike anything in her database. "Elena, your consciousness is expanding beyond the boundaries of your physical form. You're becoming a distributed entity, existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions we can't even detect." Elena nodded. She could feel it happening. Her awareness was spreading throughout the galaxy, touching every human mind, sensing every threat, monitoring every possibility. She was becoming a guardian presence that could watch over humanity forever. But there was still one more battle to fight. Overlord Vex had retreated to the fortress world of Dominion with the remaining hardliners. There, he was preparing to activate the Starkiller weapons that could destroy entire solar systems. "Commander," reported Colonel Park, "long-range sensors detect massive energy buildups on Dominion. If Vex activates those weapons, he could destroy every human world in the galaxy." Elena looked at the tactical displays, but she was also seeing something else. She could perceive the flow of time itself, the branching paths of possible futures. In most timelines, the coming battle would determine whether humanity survived or became extinct. But Elena could also see a path to victory. It would require her to complete her transformation, to become something beyond physical existence entirely. She would have to sacrifice not just her humanity, but her individual identity as well. "Set course for Dominion," Elena ordered. "It's time to end this war." As her fleet prepared for the final battle, Elena stood looking out at the stars. She could feel the weight of every human life depending on her choices. She could sense the fear and hope of billions of beings across the galaxy. Soon she would no longer be Elena Torres, the human commander who had refused to surrender. She would become something new, something that could protect the galaxy from threats that normal beings could never imagine. The price of victory had always been high, but Elena had accepted long ago that some things were worth any sacrifice, and the survival of humanity was one of them. She closed her eyes and felt the builder technology flowing through what remained of her human consciousness like a river of liquid light. The final transformation was beginning, and there was no turning back now. Elena Torres was about to die so that something greater could be born, something that would ensure that humanity's light would never be extinguished. No matter what darkness rose to challenge it, the galaxy would never be the same again. The fortress world of Dominion hung in space like a massive metal sphere covered in weapons and defensive systems. It was the oldest hegemony stronghold, built when their empire was young and their conquest of the galaxy was just beginning. Now, it was their last refuge, and Overlord Vex was preparing to make his final stand. Elena's consciousness spread through space as her fleet approached Dominion. She was no longer confined to a single body or ship. Her awareness existed across multiple dimensions, allowing her to perceive reality in ways that no physical being could understand. But with this expanded consciousness came a growing distance from her human origins. "Commander," Marcus said, speaking to the glowing energy form that had once been Elena Torres, "we're detecting massive power buildups across Dominion's surface. The Starkiller weapons are almost ready to fire." Elena's response came not as words, but as knowledge that appeared directly in Marcus's mind. The Starkiller weapons were planet destroyers that could turn entire solar systems into cosmic dust. Vex had 12 of them, enough to eliminate every human world in the galaxy. "How long do we have?" asked Dr. Rivers, who was still trying to understand what Elena had become. Elena's consciousness touched the weapons themselves, analyzing their power cores and targeting systems. 6 hours until the first weapon is ready, 18 hours until all 12 can fire simultaneously. Colonel Park studied the tactical displays showing Dominion's defenses. "Commander, even with our advanced technology, breaking through those defensive systems would take days. We don't have enough time." Elena's energy form pulsed with patterns of light that somehow conveyed amusement. "James, you're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. We're not going to break through their defenses. We're going to eliminate the need for defenses entirely." Elena began to explain her plan, but the concepts were so advanced that she had to simplify them drastically for her human crew to understand. She would use builder technology to phase the entire planet out of normal space-time, trapping it in a pocket dimension where the Starkiller weapons couldn't target anything in the real universe. "Elena," Dr. Rivers said carefully, "the energy required to manipulate an entire planet would be enormous. It might complete your transformation entirely. You could lose all connection to humanity." Elena's consciousness paused, considering this possibility. She could feel her human identity fading with each use of builder technology. Soon, she might become so advanced that she could no longer understand or care about individual human lives. But she could also see the alternative futures where she failed. In those timelines, the Starkiller weapons fired and humanity was wiped from existence. Compared to that outcome, the risk of losing herself seemed acceptable. "I understand the cost," Elena said, her words resonating through dimensions beyond normal hearing. "But some prices are worth paying." Elena's consciousness reached out toward Dominion, touching the planet's gravitational field and quantum structure. But as she began to manipulate the fundamental forces that held the world together, something unexpected happened. The planet began to fight back. Deep within Dominion's core, Elena discovered something that the hegemony had hidden for centuries. The fortress world wasn't just a military base. It was built around the remains of another builder artifact, one that had been damaged and corrupted by thousands of years of hegemony influence. The corrupted artifact recognized Elena as a fellow, builder creation, but it had been twisted by exposure to the hegemony's philosophy of domination and control. Instead of cooperation, it offered Elena a different path: absolute power over the galaxy. "Join with me," the corrupted artifact whispered in languages older than civilization. "Together we can rule over all species, bringing order through force, peace through fear." Elena felt the temptation of unlimited power. She could see how easy it would be to simply conquer the galaxy rather than liberate it. With the combined power of both artifacts, she could force every species to stop fighting, end all wars, eliminate all suffering through absolute control. But then Elena remembered something that pulled her back from the edge. She remembered the old man on Nexus Prime asking if she was still human. She remembered the doubt in her crew's eyes as they watched her transformation. She remembered the hope in the voices of freed slaves when they realized they were truly free to choose their own destinies. "No," Elena said, her voice carrying power that shook the fabric of space itself. "I didn't become this to rule over others. I became this to protect their right to be free." The confrontation between Elena and the corrupted artifact took place, not in physical space, but in a realm of pure consciousness where thoughts became reality and will determine existence. Elena's desire to protect and liberate clashed with the artifact's drive to dominate and control. The battle was visible from Elena's fleet as waves of energy erupted from Dominion's surface. Space itself seemed to crack and heal repeatedly as forces beyond physical understanding fought for supremacy. Marcus watched the displays with growing concern. "What's happening down there?" Dr. Rivers checked her instruments, but they were showing readings that made no sense. "It's like reality itself is being rewritten moment by moment." The battle between Elena and the corrupted artifact raged for hours. But gradually, Elena's pure intention began to overcome the artifact's twisted philosophy. She didn't defeat it through force, but through understanding. She showed it what true strength looked like: the courage to sacrifice everything for others, without asking for anything in return. Slowly, the corrupted artifact began to remember what it had been before the hegemony found it. It remembered the builder's original purpose: to nurture younger species and help them grow into their full potential. "I had forgotten," the artifact said as its corruption fell away like old paint. "I had forgotten what it means to serve others rather than rule them." Elena felt the second artifact merging with her consciousness, but instead of doubling her power, it doubled her wisdom. She could now see the full scope of galactic history, understanding how civilizations rose and fell, how peace could be built to last, how freedom could be protected without tyranny. With both artifacts working together, Elena reached out and gently lifted Dominion out of normal space-time. The planet and its star-killer weapons simply ceased to exist in the physical universe, trapped in a pocket dimension where they could harm no one. Overlord Vex found himself standing in what appeared to be an infinite white void, face to face with Elena's transformed consciousness. She appeared to him as a figure of pure light that somehow still carried echoes of the human she had once been. "Where are we?" Vex demanded. "In a place between reality and possibility," Elena replied. "A place where we can talk without the distractions of war and politics." Vex looked around at the endless white space. "You mean to kill me here?" Elena shook her head, an oddly human gesture from her transformed state. "I mean to give you a choice. You can continue down the path of domination and control, ruling over a pocket dimension where you can harm no one but yourself. Or you can choose to help build something better." Elena showed Vex visions of what the galaxy could become. She showed him worlds where different species worked together, where conflicts were resolved through understanding rather than violence, where strength was measured by how well you protected others rather than how many others you controlled. "This is impossible," Vex said. "Different species cannot coexist peacefully. There will always be conflict, always be war." "There will always be disagreements," Elena agreed. "But disagreement doesn't have to mean war. Competition doesn't have to mean domination. Strength doesn't have to mean oppression," Elena offered. Vex her hand. "Help me build a galaxy where every species can grow and flourish according to their own nature. Help me create a future where freedom is protected by those strong enough to defend it." For a long moment, Vex stared at Elena's outstretched hand. He had spent his entire life believing that might made right, that the strong were destined to rule over the weak. But Elena's power was greater than anything he had ever imagined, and yet she was offering cooperation instead of demanding submission. Slowly, Overlord Vex reached out and took Elena's hand. The moment their hands touched, Elena's consciousness expanded once again. But this time, instead of absorbing power, she was sharing it. Her awareness spread throughout the galaxy, touching every inhabited world, every space station, every ship. For one brief moment, every intelligent being in the galaxy felt Elena's presence in their mind. But instead of fear or compulsion, they felt understanding. They felt the possibility of a future without endless war, without oppression, without the fear that had dominated galactic politics for so long. Most importantly, they felt that this future was being offered to them, not imposed upon them. They could choose to be part of building something better, or they could choose to continue as they always had. The choice was theirs. The response was overwhelming. On millions of worlds, billions of beings reached out with their consciousness toward Elena's presence, accepting her invitation to build a better galaxy. Elena felt their acceptance flowing through her transformed consciousness like a river of hope. She was no longer Elena Torres, the human commander. She had become something new, a guardian. Elena's consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of physical space, flowing through dimensions that existed between thought and reality. She could perceive every star system in the galaxy simultaneously, sense every living being, understand every conflict before it began. The transformation was complete. Elena Torres, the human commander, no longer existed as an individual entity. In her place was something new, a transcendent guardian that existed everywhere and nowhere at once. The first thing Elena did with her new form was to appear simultaneously on millions of worlds throughout the galaxy. Her presence manifested differently to each species according to their ability to perceive higher dimensional beings. To humans, she appeared as a figure of golden light that still carried echoes of her original form. To the crystal beings of the Nexus worlds, she was a harmony of resonating frequencies. To the energy creatures like Flux, she was a pattern of organized consciousness that spoke in languages of pure meaning. People of the galaxy. Elena's voice carried across space itself, reaching every intelligent mind regardless of species or location. The age of the hegemony is over. The age of the Confederation begins today. On Earth, the surviving humans emerged from their underground bunkers for the first time in years. The sky above their homeworld was clear for the first time since the war began. The orbital debris from destroyed ships had been cleared away, and the atmosphere was slowly healing from the damage of countless battles. General Ross, now very old and tired, stood in the ruins of what had once been New York City. Around him, other survivors looked up at the sky with wonder and disbelief. "Is it really over?" asked a young woman who had never seen Earth's surface before this day. Elena's presence touched the woman's mind gently, filling her with certainty and hope. "It's over," came Elena's voice, though it seemed to speak from the air itself. "You're free to rebuild, to grow, to become whatever you choose to be." But Elena's transcendence came with a price that was immediately apparent to those who had known her best. When Marcus tried to communicate with her, he found that she responded to his thoughts before he could speak them. When Dr. Rivers attempted to have a conversation with her, Elena would answer questions that hadn't been asked yet because she could perceive all possible conversations simultaneously. "Elena," Marcus said, standing in what had been her command center. "Are you still you?" Elena's response came not as words, but as a complete transfer of understanding. Marcus suddenly knew everything that Elena had become, everything she had gained, and everything she had lost. He saw that she still loved humanity, but it was now an abstract love for an entire species rather than personal affection for individuals. She still wanted to protect people, but she thought of protection in terms of cosmic patterns and galactic-scale consequences rather than individual safety. "I am what I needed to become," Elena finally said, in words that Marcus could understand. "I am what was necessary to ensure that no species ever again faces extinction because they chose to be free." Elena's first major act as a transcendent being was to address the galactic community as a whole. She called together representatives from every inhabited world for the largest political gathering in galactic history. But instead of meeting in a physical location, Elena created a shared consciousness space where beings from vastly different species could communicate directly mind to mind. In this space, Elena appeared in her most complete form, a being of pure light and energy that somehow still carried the essential spirit of the human commander who had refused to surrender. Around her, thousands of representatives from hundreds of species gathered to hear her proposal for a new galactic order. "For too long," Elena said, "this galaxy has been ruled by fear. Fear of the different, fear of the weak, fear of change. The hegemony grew powerful by exploiting these fears, by convincing species that they could only be safe by dominating others." Elena gestured, and the representatives could see visions of galactic history, the rise and fall of countless civilizations, the cycles of conquest and rebellion that had repeated for millions of years. "But there is another way," Elena continued, "a way based not on domination but on cooperation, not on uniformity but on diversity, not on fear but on hope." Elena's proposal was radical, a galactic confederation where each species maintained its sovereignty while contributing to collective defense and prosperity. Disputes would be resolved through mediation rather than warfare. Trade would be based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Most importantly, no species would be forced to join or forced to leave. Participation would be entirely voluntary. "And who would enforce these ideals?" asked the representative from the hegemony's former capital world. "Who would prevent strong species from dominating weak ones?" Elena's response was to demonstrate her power. For just a moment, she allowed every representative to feel her presence at its full strength. They experienced what it was like to exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously, to perceive the flow of time as a navigable river, to understand the fundamental forces that held the universe together. "I will," Elena said simply. "Not as a ruler, but as a guardian. I will intervene only when necessary to prevent large-scale oppression or extinction-level conflicts. But I will not govern your daily lives, decide your policies, or determine your futures. Those choices will remain yours." The response to Elena's proposal was overwhelmingly positive, but it came with concerns. Many species worried about what would happen if Elena ever decided to use her power for conquest rather than protection. Others wondered whether a being so far beyond normal existence could truly understand the needs of physical beings. Elena addressed these concerns by voluntarily limiting her own power. She bound herself with constraints that prevented her from directly controlling any government or forcing any species to act against their will. She could intervene to stop genocides or prevent cosmic catastrophes, but she could not and would not rule. "Power without restraint is tyranny," Elena said. "I will not become what I fought to destroy." Over the following days, Elena worked tirelessly to establish the framework for the new confederation. She helped draft treaties, mediated disputes between former enemies, and coordinated the massive task of rebuilding war-torn worlds. But her transcendence also meant that she was losing touch with the human perspective that had originally motivated her. When she spoke with individual humans, they found her increasingly difficult to relate to. She thought in terms of centuries rather than years, species rather than individuals, cosmic patterns rather than personal concerns. Dr. Rivers noticed this during one of their conversations. "Elena, when you talk about humanity's future, you sound like you're discussing a scientific experiment rather than the lives of people you care about." Elena paused, considering this observation. It was true that her emotional connection to individual humans was fading. She still loved humanity as a whole, but it was becoming harder to care about specific human problems when she could perceive the vast scope of galactic affairs. "Kate," Elena said, "I can see possible futures stretching out for millions of years. I can see how decisions made today will affect countless generations. When you have that perspective, individual concerns start to seem very small. But those individual concerns are what make life worth living," Rivers replied. "Love, friendship, personal dreams, small daily joys. If you lose touch with those things, how can you protect what makes humanity human?" Elena considered this question for a long time. Her enhanced consciousness could process information at incredible speeds, but some problems required more than just processing power. They required wisdom that came from understanding the heart as well as the mind. Finally, Elena made a decision that surprised everyone. She created what she called anchor points, small fragments of her original human consciousness that she preserved unchanged within her transcendent awareness. These anchor points would always remember what it felt like to be Elena Torres, the human woman who had refused to give up hope even when hope seemed impossible. "I will not lose myself completely," Elena said. "Part of me will always be human, no matter how far I evolve beyond human limitations." As the Confederation began to take shape, Elena found herself in the strange position of being simultaneously the most powerful being in the galaxy and the most isolated. She could communicate with anyone, appear anywhere, and understand everything, but she could never again experience the simple human pleasures of friendship, love, or belonging. Still, Elena accepted this sacrifice willingly. Every day she watched as former enemies began working together. She saw species that had been slaves for generations, taking their first steps toward self-governance. She witnessed the beginnings of trade networks, cultural exchanges, and scientific collaborations that would have been impossible under the old order. Most importantly, Elena saw hope returning to the galaxy. On millions of worlds, beings who had lived in fear for generations were beginning to believe that a better future was possible. The transformation was not just Elena's anymore. It was the galaxy's as well, and Elena, in her new form, as a guardian. Presence would ensure that this transformation led not to another cycle of conquest and oppression, but to something genuinely new. 5 years had passed since Elena's transcendence, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Where once there had been the iron grip of the hegemony, now there was the loose but strong fabric of the Confederation. Trade routes that had been forbidden for centuries were now busy highways of commerce and cultural exchange. Species that had never spoken to each other were now collaborating on projects that benefited everyone. On Earth, the morning sun rose over New Geneva, humanity's new capital city. The architecture was a beautiful blend of human design and alien technology, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like crystalline trees. In the central plaza, Humans worked alongside representatives from dozens of other species, their different forms and abilities combining to create something greater than any single species could achieve alone. Marcus Webb stood at the window of his office in the presidential palace, watching the bustling activity below. His hair was gray now, and lines of experience marked his face, but his eyes still held the determination that had carried him through the war years. As Earth's first elected president, he had the challenging task of leading humanity's integration into the galactic community. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Dr. Kate Rivers appeared on the holographic display, calling from the Galactic Science Council headquarters on the neutral world of Harmony Station. "Good morning, Marcus," Kate said. She looked older, too, but her scientist's curiosity remained as sharp as ever. "I wanted to brief you on the latest developments in our study of builder technology." Marcus turned from the window and sat at his desk. "What have you learned?" "We've made remarkable progress in understanding how the technology adapts to different species," Kate explained. "The key insight is that builder technology doesn't just respond to mental commands, it responds to the fundamental nature of the species using it. For humans, it enhances our adaptability and creativity. For the crystal beings, it amplifies their harmonic resonance. For energy species like Flux's people, it stabilizes their coherence patterns." Marcus nodded. This was consistent with what they had observed over the past 5 years. Each species that gained access to builder technology found that it enhanced their natural strengths rather than imposing foreign capabilities. "But there's something else," Kate continued. "Something we've discovered about Elena's current state." Marcus leaned forward with interest. Elena's presence could be felt throughout the galaxy, but direct communication with her had become increasingly rare. She appeared when major crises threatened galactic stability, but otherwise, she seemed to exist in a realm beyond normal space and time. "We've detected that Elena's consciousness exists in multiple states simultaneously," Kate explained. "Part of her maintains awareness of galactic affairs, monitoring threats and maintaining the stability of the Confederation. But other parts of her consciousness exist in different temporal states, experiencing past and future events as if they were happening now." "What does that mean for her?" Marcus asked. "It means she's truly transcended linear time," Kate said. "But it also means that her experience of existence is fundamentally different from ours. She doesn't experience life as a sequence of moments, but as a complete pattern that she can perceive all at once." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from Marcus's aide. "Mr. President, we're receiving a priority communication from the Outer Rim territories. There's been a first contact situation." Marcus looked at Kate on the screen. "Want to observe a bit of history being made?" The communication came from Captain Rosa Martinez, who now commanded one of the Confederation's exploration fleets. Her ship, the New Hope, was currently stationed at the edge of known space, where the galaxy's spiral arms faded into the void between galaxies. "Mr. President," Rosa reported, "we've encountered a species unlike anything in our databases. They're refugees from another galaxy entirely, fleeing some kind of cosmic disaster. Their technology is completely different from anything we've seen, but they're clearly intelligent and peaceful." Marcus felt a familiar sense of excitement and responsibility. These were the moments that defined the Confederation's character, how they responded to the unknown, how they treated those seeking help. "What do they need?" Marcus asked. "Safe passage to uninhabited star systems where they can establish new colonies," Rosa replied. "Their ships are damaged from their long journey, and their population is in the millions. They're asking for asylum." Marcus was about to respond when he felt a familiar presence in his mind. Elena's consciousness touched his thoughts gently, not controlling or commanding, but sharing information and perspective. Through Elena's awareness, Marcus could see the refugee fleet as it truly was. They were indeed peaceful, fleeing the death of their home galaxy in a cosmic collision that wouldn't reach this galaxy for billions of years. Their technology was based on principles that could complement Confederation science beautifully. Most importantly, their culture valued cooperation and diversity, making them natural candidates for Confederation membership. But Elena also showed Marcus the longer view. These refugees were the first of many that would arrive over the coming centuries as their galaxy died. How the Confederation responded to this first group would establish precedents that would shape galactic policy for generations. Grant them asylum, Marcus decided. Offer them membership in the Confederation if they want it. And Rosa, make sure they know they're welcome here. After the communication ended, Marcus sat quietly for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. In the old days, such a choice might have taken months of debate and political maneuvering. But the Confederation had been designed to act quickly and decisively when compassion was called for. A soft shimmer in the air announced Elena's arrival. She appeared in Marcus's office as she sometimes did when important decisions were made. A figure of gentle light that somehow still carried echoes of the woman he had once known. "Hello, Marcus," Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "Elena," Marcus replied warmly. "It's good to see you. How are you adjusting to everything?" Elena smiled, an expression that was both familiar and alien. "I exist in a state that can't really be described in words you would understand. But the human part of me, the anchor points I preserved, still experiences something like happiness when I see the Confederation thriving." Marcus studied his old friend's transformed appearance. "Do you ever regret what you became?" Elena considered the question for a long moment. "I regret that I can no longer share a meal with friends or feel the warmth of sunlight on my skin. I regret that I can't experience the simple human joys that once meant everything to me. But when I see former slave worlds governing themselves, when I watch species that were enemies for millennia working together on joint projects, when I witness the hope in the eyes of refugees who know they'll be welcomed rather than turned away, no, I don't regret my choice." Elena moved to the window and looked out at the bustling plaza below. "Do you know what I see when I look at this city, Marcus?" "What do you see?" "I see the future I was trying to protect when I first touched the builder technology," Elena said. "I see humans and aliens working together not because they're forced to, but because they choose to. I see diversity being celebrated instead of feared. I see strength being used to protect rather than to dominate." Elena turned back to Marcus. "In a few hours, I'll appear to the refugee fleet to welcome them personally to our galaxy. In a few days, I'll intervene in a border dispute between two Confederation members before it escalates to violence. Next month, I'll help coordinate the evacuation of a star system whose sun is about to go supernova. These are the responsibilities I accepted when I became what I am now." "And you don't find it lonely?" Marcus asked. Elena's expression became wistful. "Terribly lonely," she admitted. "But loneliness is a small price to pay for ensuring that no child in this galaxy will ever have to grow up in fear of extinction simply because their species chose to be free." Marcus reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then stopped, remembering that Elena was no longer entirely physical. "Is there anything we can do to help? Anything that would make your existence more bearable?" Elena smiled at his concern. "Actually, there is something. I've been thinking about establishing what I call memory gardens, places where I can experience echoes of human emotions and connections through the preserved experiences of others. Would you be willing to share some of your memories with me? The good ones? The moments of friendship and hope and simple human joy?" "Of course," Marcus said without hesitation. "Anything you need." Elena extended her hand, and when Marcus touched it, he felt a warm flow of connection. For a moment, Elena experienced his memories as if they were her own, The first time he had laughed with his engineering crew. The pride he felt when Earth's children took their first steps into the larger galaxy. The quiet satisfaction of building something beautiful and lasting. "Thank you," Elena said, and for a moment she looked almost human again. "These memories will help me remember why I chose this path." Their reunion was interrupted by another communication alert.